Can you see that okay?
I can. Good. Great. All right, folks. I hope everyone is having a great evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Brad Nickel. My partner, Chuck, we're to work together on a project called Kilroy. We're going to talk to you about that a little bit more later. But this is the agenda, what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about our experience in this world and what we're up to. We're going to talk a bit about how to find product market fit in this crazy blockchain world. We're going to talk about building on Bitcoin and what that means, what DeFi can teach Bitcoin founders about succeeding, the opportunity to bridge the old world, Web 2, whatever you want to call it, TradFi, into the new. And then we're going to get into the project that we're working on that might make all of this easier. We're going to talk about our project Kilroy. And then at the end, we're going to talk about, excuse me, how we might be able to work together or collaborate on your projects. So, okay, so about the Kilroy team, as it said in the agenda, we are oldish. We don't consider ourselves old, but we have both been at the startup and tech scene thing for quite a while. I have been in startups and techs for about 27 years. I built one of the first web-based SaaS products in 1997, and people thought my partner and I were a bit nuts for thinking that people would use applications in a web browser. But we were probably a little ahead of our time. Ever since then, I have been heavily engaged with helping startups build, launch, and grow. And I've been in the crypto space, bought my first Bitcoin in 2015, actively, heavily engaged since 2017. And I host two shows called DeFi Lunch and Mission DeFi that are podcast and video channel. Most people listen to it on a podcast, but they're all about founders and projects innovating and building and growing in the decentralized finance space. Chuck, you want to quickly run through your stuff?
Sure. So I'm a lifetime serial entrepreneur. I've probably done about 10 startups at this point, at least $75 million worth of VC thrown at them. Spent a lot of time in various market sectors, both private, government, and academia. And that really helped a lot in figuring out how do you look at markets, who are your users, how do you figure out what types of applications are going to be compelling, and turned that into some time spent with several venture capital firms and back into the startup space. And the projects and the discussions that you're going to see today are about the same vintage as Brad's. I think I mined my first Bitcoin in 2014 and lost the wallet in 2015, and it's been downhill ever since. Go ahead, Brad.
All right, let's move on to the next one. So finding product market fit in the startup world is something where founders can easily iterate on their existing web-based applications. They can use low-code, no-code tools to build and launch and test and interview customers. But in the blockchain world, it's much more difficult. Over on the non-Bitcoin side of the world, where we've done quite a bit of work already, the difficulty in developing and building is extreme. In the Bitcoin world, layering financial applications and working within Bitcoin and working with Bitcoin is even more difficult unless you're using some layer twos or side chains. But in order to gain success, startups really have to be able to rapidly iterate, and it's exceedingly difficult to do. So how do we go about doing that? Well, one of the things I recommend to startups is you don't want to do the complete fake it as till you make it, but there is an opportunity to build out MVPs with minimally required on-chain integration with the UI and UX that you think users might want for solving the problem that you have, and be able to kind of test and interview your target markets using that MVP. It makes it much more difficult because you're not necessarily going to be able to do as much on chain to be able to figure out exactly what works for people. But it gives you an opportunity to at least try to iterate further on the projects you have. Again, it's difficult, it's a little clunky, but it's the best way we have to do now. So what I would highly recommend is kind of following the startup maxims of making sure that you've spoken to and interviewed your target markets to make sure that what you're actually trying to build and what you're building is something they really want, and then being able to kind of at least start with mock-ups and show them what's possible and what you can do in order to gain some traction on whether the idea has any legs.
Brad, one thing to add to that for sure is during this iterative process, you don't want to try to build the full user experience enough to show that it'll work, whether that's to prove to investors that you have a good idea or to get your early adopters in the marketplace. You really want to have feedback from real users, though, because most projects that are started by technically focused individuals end up spending a lot of time on what's under the hood and not so much time on the front end. And it's really important to get real users engaged as early as you can.
Yeah, and I would say further to that, too, real quickly, that your users, your target personas that you're interviewing at the MVP stage, they're going to understand that you're not going to have the most beautiful functional application if you explain it to them. So it's just a matter of being honest with them about what you have and what you don't have. So we haven't had in-depth discussions with those of you that are members of this organization and that are building and trying to build on Bitcoin. But I think it's important to kind of ask, what does it mean to build on Bitcoin? And that can be everything from payments to trading in perpetuals, using Lightning, using Taproot, layer twos and side chains. I'm not sure kind of the philosophical feeling about that amongst the members of this group, but that is currently an option with Stacks and some other platforms. And whether or not you have a token or no token, I'm sure the full-blown Bitcoiners in the group would not like to see tokens floating around. But sometimes for some models, those may be something that have to be considered. So what you have to think about as you're thinking about building your Bitcoin-based application or Bitcoin-oriented application is what is really possible today versus what may be coming down the pike, because there are certainly some tools available to you, but they are going to, based on kind of your philosophical approach to Bitcoin, they are going to potentially limit what you're capable of building and not building. And so it's just a matter of deciding for yourself how far you're willing to go off of chain in order to build the application that you think people might want in order to get them into Bitcoin or to integrate it with kind of real world applications. So we have a ton of experience in the decentralized finance space, or DeFi, over in the Ethereum and other layer one chains world. Those are folks that are working and building in primarily the language called Solidity. They are deploying on Ethereum mainnet or layer twos on Ethereum because the performance on Ethereum isn't great. And then also deploying on other layer ones. But there has been a ton of activity in that world. And while most of you will probably never necessarily build or think about being a part of decentralized finance outside of Bitcoin, I think some of the things that the lessons learned in the DeFi space are directly applicable to what you all will be building. And, you know, we can look at kind of the core components of the things that are being built in decentralized finance, or DeFi as it's called in that world. Lending, which is a part of every financial system in the world. Yield farming, money markets, stable coins, which a lot of people are advocating more and more for in the Bitcoin space. But the things to think about are that out of the gate today, going directly to Bitcoin users or going directly to other crypto users, you're going to have an exceedingly limited customer base. And the first groups of folks that you're probably going to attract are early adopters, or what we call degens, that are willing to kind of take a risk on financial applications in the space. Now, you may not be building a financial applications, and my apologies that this may not directly apply to you, but this is kind of the world we come from. The other thing to understand is that more and more applications enter into the Bitcoin world that are related to financials, that in the initial stages, in the early days of kind of all of this building that's happening, you'll be cannibalizing from other applications that have similar functionality, or if it's a rewards-based system, from those applications as well. In the DeFi space, APY is the way to success, but it's also the way to death. But that's only if you have a token. and you're churning out tokens as rewards to people on a layer 2 or sidechain on Bitcoin. We don't really have an idea of how much Bitcoiners will take part in financial applications like the DeFi applications we see on Ethereum, but my suspicion is if they can earn on their holdings, then they will likely be interested in that. And so for those of you that are still trying to figure out what you might want to build, there are a ton of great examples of applications you may want to think about and consider outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum that you could build and adopt into this world. And then, as I said earlier, lending is a really core infrastructure piece of all of this. So one of the biggest things that everyone in crypto tries to advocate for is how do we get people that don't know crypto over? Coinbase came out with a survey the other day that said 20% of Americans, I'm sorry for the American-centric view, but 20% of Americans own crypto. And so they were trying to make the point, some others were trying to make the point that because so many people own Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, that means we could potentially become a political force in the United States in elections. My point of view would be is that that's not true. My point of view is that 99% of the people that have bought cryptocurrency have zero concept of how Bitcoin works, don't understand what a blockchain is, and they were just speculating on exchanges to try to make some more money. We have a long ways to go, and we are incredibly early before a larger number of people in the world are understanding the power and capabilities of blockchain and Bitcoin. And so one of the more difficult things we have to think about is how do we bridge users into functionality that we may develop that's functioning on the blockchain or functioning financially on the blockchain without having to train them in everything that is the blockchain. So it's difficult, and it's going to be even more difficult in a bear market. And because most people start off on a centralized exchange, that makes it even more difficult. So we're big advocates for working to integrate your applications that you're building into fintech or other applications. So it's a really seamless integration so that users of existing applications in Web 2 or TradFi or DeFi don't really necessarily even have to understand all the implications of how the blockchain functions. We also think that in the earliest days, a lot of the products that get built should probably orient their thinking to being an engine. And by that, I mean, you have an opportunity in these really early stages to become infrastructure, to become engines for financial applications or other applications on Bitcoin that other applications may use. So could you create an engine that would allow for lending or escrow or some other financial application that other applications outside of Bitcoin might use? And then as the space grows, you become a critical component of the core infrastructure. Are there opportunities in infrastructure for nodes and node management and deployment? There's a lot of opportunities in the early days. Those building infrastructure, security, et cetera, probably have the best chance for long-time sustenance. And then what you have to understand is it's going to be really important that if you go that route and you want to try to do integrations from a business development perspective, you have to be prepared to be able to help your partners develop. Just providing APIs to them probably won't be enough if they're not Bitcoin native people. So we are working on a project that we think may be able to help you guys iterate and get to product market fit. It's called Kilroy. And it's called Kilroy because during World War II, I won't go into a lot of the details, it was the first physical meme. And it was a meme that was seen around the world and that forces around the world kind of used to show that they were unified and together. And we think Kilroy does a lot for that. So we're calling Kilroy the adoption layer for Bitcoin. And we think that in order for us to gain traction, we need to make it easier to integrate crypto and blockchain with the real world, as well as integrate between applications on Bitcoin. So Kilroy helps boost adoption by making user experiences seamless between applications, worlds, and games. And it allows for users to be operating locally on their own devices as opposed to having to visit websites and creating a security risk vector for them. All of their Bitcoin, that's fine, I covered that. So Kilroy is a low-code, no-code development and automation platform. It allows end users, developers with very little or no experience to build simple to complex applications, automations, and workflows using protocol composability. Developers can easily integrate TradFi, games, Web2, and apps to any application they choose. And experienced developers can write code directly or create more complex interactions. And I think something that's important for everyone to understand is that one of the other target markets that is low-hanging fruit are the institutional investors that are already investing in things like Bitcoin. They are potential integrations that could be done with their existing dashboards within their organizations. Kilroy is an easy-to-use, decentralized UI for crypto. It provides a standardized interface across all apps. It makes it easy for users to understand how apps can function. It means users never have to visit a protocol's website to use an application, making it safer and more intuitive. And Kilroy will have a strategy and an app store making apps, games, investing strategies, and metaverse discovery easier. Chuck, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So one of the important things to realize about this platform, and it goes to how long it can take for adoption to happen for products that are infrastructure, is that the Kilroy platform has been in continuous use and development since late 2016, early 2017. It was originally designed for the middle market debt institutions that would do $50 to $250 million sorts of deals, not quite investment, multinational investment banker grade deals, but we used it in 2017 to tokenize and distribute the first regulated debt instrument on the Ethereum blockchain, and it's done about $250 million worth of tradable assets since then. Just sort of pre-COVID in the 2020 timeframe, we did a pivot from the investment banking and debt issuance space into pure crypto and started focusing the product on integrations within the blockchain world with the tooling that was there, with the protocols and the services that are available, both in the EVM-backed world as well as in the Bitcoin space. And we've used it during that time to prototype a bunch of different startups, helping define user interface, interactions, workflows, potential integration points, and to do a lot of collaborative work, some of which we're going to show in just a little bit. The platform is continually being operated on and integrated with. Every time there's a new project that shows up that has a capability that we want to integrate, it's very easy to add in interfaces, calls to smart contracts, or new API services. So the Kilroy platform itself is a fairly mature product. What is new is the Kilroy BTC approach. And this is a version of the Kilroy engine and infrastructure that's focused specifically on the Bitcoin world and integrating Bitcoin with real world applications, TradFi applications, GameFi, and other blockchains as well, as Brad discussed. And it will bring drag and drop functionality, easy to use integration for things that are relatively challenging to integrate now, like interacting directly with Lightning, heaven forbid, operating a Lightning node yourself, dealing with the disparate numbers of exchanges that are out there and all of their various APIs, as well as the different blockchains that you might want to integrate with. It's very, excuse me, it's very important to note that we focused on decentralization. Most projects, whether it's a Bitcoin related project or a DeFi related project, have some dependence on centralized assets, whether that's a centralized exchange, a centralized web server to host product user interface and data sources, or whatever. And the philosophy behind Kilroy is that everybody can run a copy of Kilroy, can have it locally on their own machine, on an appliance, have an account on a cloud service, however they choose to deploy it. We've built it to be completely scalable, and we have examples of it running on little tiny Raspberry Pis all the way up to thousands of users, multi-tenant cloud servers. And one of the important aspects that's in the process of being integrated into the Kilroy BTC platform is serverless peer-to-peer comms. So you're not even dependent on centralized services like a Telegram or a Discord or some other server-moderated communication mechanism. We also are in the process of building in simple retail user interfaces, a lot of the transactions that people want to do really distill down to lend or borrow or pay or receive funds. Those four building blocks comprise most of what people are trying to do online with cryptocurrencies and blockchains. And we feel like if we make those functions available and approachable and give them building blocks that can be used and combined in novel ways, that's going to give a lot of the foundation that you wouldn't have to build otherwise, right? It's going to be there and ready to be built on. You don't have to build the ability to do a loan or a swap or a payment or a receipt of proceeds. And so right now, building on the existing DeFi Kilroy platform, it's up and available for collaborative projects. We are working with two other projects now and are happy to bring more into the fold, whether that's to use the technology that's available, work with us on the lessons learned that we've found in this space, mocking up an MVP for demo purposes or a capital raise, all the way through to doing your initial versions of your application or deploying it into production. The goal with the Kilroy BTC application itself is, in addition to the developer-facing focus that we have right now and the startup and business focus, there will be an end-user focused release in this calendar year, really depending on how we decide to nail down the various features. And just to give you a little bit of a look at what's under the hood, these are some of the integrations that are already in place inside of the Kilroy engine that you can use in a no-code or low-code environment. All of the usual things that you would expect to be able to do on blockchain, smart contract interactions, token issuance, financial transactions, records on distributed ledgers, all those things are all under the hood. Cloud data storage, whether it's something like Amazon's S3 or a commercial service like Dropbox or Box or Google Drive. And a lot of integration for enterprise grade things like commercial deal rooms and accessing storage on your local network. Messaging protocols are all supported, the typical ones that you would think of, which have a lot of API integrations, as well as the serverless peer-to-peer integrations that I mentioned earlier. The whole user interaction model is designed around drag and drop, where you can pick functionality. It's designed to work with the other pieces. They snap together, do what they're supposed to do. And there's other support in the platform for more mundane things like uploading and downloading files if you have to ingest data files or produce reports, and other sorts of dashboarding capabilities for doing real-time charting and providing security to the data in a role-based fashion. It has internal support for business processes. So if you, for instance, were building an application to support a family office or an investment process that had multiple steps, whether it's for compliance reasons or just internal consistency that you want people to go through, there's an easy way in the system to define these workflows and have users go through specific steps and checkpoints and confirmations. The system is built to be very extensible. Under the hood, its engine is a Node.js application. All of our integrations are primarily through JavaScript or external network integrations, typically with REST APIs. The platform can be deployed as a standalone binary. It can run as an Electron-based app. It's Dockerized, so you can run it in any Docker-compatible container environment. The DevOps portion of this has been eliminated. And then finally, recently we've done a lot of integration, particularly for demo purposes in the Minecraft world, just to show the idea of bringing crypto and blockchain and DeFi into a more familiar gaming environment where you can actually do real work and have real value injected into the game world without the users having to worry about setting up wallets or dealing with getting connected to blockchains or even understanding the crypto world directly. So we're going to do a quick little demo here, and I just want to give you a heads up of what's coming. First of all, everything you're going to see today is running on a single desktop computer. It could be a cloud version, it could be the embedded platform, but in this case, it's actually all running on the desktop that I'm talking to you through. So it's not a very compute intensive platform when you're using it to support a local user. One of the important things that you're going to see is this idea of decentralized user interface. That is, user interfaces and interactions that a user would normally do with a cloud-based centralized web server are all going to be happening locally on the local machine. We'll show some a couple of examples of that, a nice GameFi example, and then a quick peek under the hood at the tools that are available to developers. So give me a second to switch what I'm showing on the screen. I need to stop this display and switch to a different one. So give me just a second. I'm going to show this whole desktop. I think that's going to work. All right. Can you guys see my desktop now?
Yep.
Okay. So what you're going to see is the less than exciting user interface that's the developer mode of Kilroy. And I got to get this, hang on just a second. I got to get the over helpful Zoom toolbar out of the way. So the first thing that we want to do is look at a couple of different types of applications that we've developed in Kilroy, some of our own and some that have been in collaboration with other projects. So I'm going to hop off to our little app store where we can view some of the apps that are available for download. And Kilroy is fundamentally designed around the idea that you will build and distribute self-contained applications that include all of the user interface elements and all of the back-end server components all in one package that can be pulled down and executed on top of this engine. They can be digitally signed, they can be locked up so that they can't be tampered with. There is a high degree of security around these downloadable components. And if it was integrated into your own project, you certainly have the ability to just have things that are preloaded and pre-configured with no downloads. But I'm going to go pull in, let's see, this Spirit Swap Kilroy app. I want to get our sample dApp, and we want to look at this vault strategy. Okay, so we've got 3 apps that have gotten installed, and you can see they've shown up in the list here. And I'm going to go ahead and start them up all at once now, and we'll go in and look at them individually. So we'll start the DeFi strategy. We're going to start the sample dApp, and we're going to start up Spirit Swap. So the first thing that we want to look at over here is this strategy. This was one of the first DeFi applications that we built in Kilroy as a proof of concept of this whole idea of composable strategies, where an end user can pick piece parts from multiple projects and integrate them into a single display. And I'm going to launch this, and then I'm going to let Brad describe a little bit about what you're seeing here. We're not going to run this one because it takes a little bit of time to run, and we've got some other stuff to show in the time that we've got. But Brad, why don't you talk about what this particular strategy was designed to do?
Yeah, so for those of you that aren't very familiar kind of on the technical side of DeFi in the non-Bitcoin world, Solidity smart contracts, for the most part, are what is known as composable. And so the idea behind it is that there are components of functionality that are permissionlessly available for other applications to use and build upon. So it might be a lending application, it might be a staking and yielding application, it might be swapping, money markets, whatever. And so the idea behind this application in kind of the Solidity world, which is where we started with deployment of this platform, is we want to make it easy for investors who have a particular strategy that they want to implement to be able to drag and drop composable functionality from different providers so that they can execute an investing strategy. And that's actually a very common thing in the Ethereum DeFi world. And that is you may be borrowing on one protocol, you may be yield farming on another protocol, you may be lending on another protocol and swapping at another protocol. You may get better rates, you may get a yield, whatever. And so the idea was, can we drag and drop this together and make it happen? So in this example, this is happening on the Phantom Layer 1 blockchain. And it's utilizing 3 different protocols to execute a strategy. So in the first step on a lending protocol, it's lending a token called FTM. And then in the second step, it then takes that base that they have and borrows a token called Frax, which is an algorithmic stablecoin. Then it goes to another protocol called Spooky Swap, and it swaps the token that they borrowed for a token called Geom. And then it goes to another aspect of Spooky Swap and creates a liquidity providing liquidity pool on Spooky Swap, where you can earn fees for providing liquidity to swaps, and sets up a liquidity pool, and then takes the tokens that you get from the liquidity pool and puts them into an automated yield compounding application called Beefy, and Beefy will automatically compound your earnings from the liquidity pool you set up. So it does all of this automatically, whereas for the average user, this would be a 5-step process. It would take anywhere from a half hour to an hour to get everything set up, get all the tokens in place, etc. Kilroy allows you to automate all of this. You can set it up so that every time you dropped 1,000 FTM into that wallet, it would automatically execute this strategy. You can set it up so that it's a manual start on the strategy, but then it executes all the pieces of the strategy afterwards. The idea being that it shows how you can drag and drop components of an investing strategy in the finance world and make it easy for people to automate. The other key important thing is when the market starts to crash, getting out of a multi-step, multi-protocol strategy can be very difficult. With Kilroy, you'll be able to one-click exit and unwind from all of this strategy, so you can get out faster than the rest of the market.
So I failed to do this when I first opened this up, but just to give everybody an understanding of what it is that you're looking at, everything inside of this white box is one view of the Kilroy app. This is the native view that Kilroy allows you to produce. And it's a little bit like, you can imagine a tool like Adobe Illustrator or some other object-oriented drawing program like Visio or something like that, where you can do a nice visual layout, and it's all hooked into things that are going on behind the scenes. So when this runs, the boxes light up, there's animations that show what's going on. That's all part of what's built into the platform, including all of the integrations to pull in wallet balances and prices and what's going on in the market and things like that in real time. So this is an end user view, and this is one end user view. This is one that you get for free in this platform. There are other views that you're going to see that are web oriented that require a traditional sort of web development approach to it. Brad, is there anything else you want to say on this? Otherwise, we'll switch over to
I was just going to say, though, if anybody wants to see any of these demos run in full, at the end of the presentation, we'll have our contact information up, and you can reach out to us and we can send you videos of them, or if you'd like to book a time to look more, we're happy to do that.
Right. Okay. So another key example of what people are doing to get to market fast and to do it in a way that's secure and decentralized is to build apps out of their traditionally centralized user interfaces and embed them inside of a Kilroy application. This is a quick architectural overview of what's going on, where this gray box is my local desktop machine. It's running a web browser that we're looking at in this presentation right now. It's talking to the Kilroy engine on the back end, which is being a host for all of SpiritSwap's user interface code and potentially any backend code that they need. SpiritSwap is a lending, swapping, staking application on the Phantom blockchain, and their project has coordinated closely with us over the last several months to move their user interface into a form that can be independently served either from their centralized web service or decentralized onto any Kilroy platform running anywhere on the network. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, I'm going to open that their user interface up inside of our window. This is the full SpiritSwap application. If you went to spiritswap.finance, you would see exactly this, but you can see from the URL up here, this is all coming off the local machine. And so all of their functions are in here. It's all live and connected to the blockchain. Real pricing is coming in, real operations. It's even actually hooked up to my MetaMask wallet up here already. And so this is an example of a single click download of a DeFi project, immediately avoiding all of the complications of being centralized. There's no chance of their domain name being stolen. There's no chance of somebody compromising their server. There's no man in the middle attack. There's no malicious code injection possible through a proxy, because this is all my local browser talking to Kilroy on my local desktop using the application locally.
And Chuck, just a quick note that Spirit Swap actually was motivated to work with us even more so because they were the victims of a DNS
That's right.
hack. And so they had users who went to the website, thought they were on the Spirit Swap website. In fact, someone had taken their domain and redirected it to a copy of the site, and people would deposit their tokens or do swaps, and those tokens were going straight into the hacker's wallet.
Great. Okay, so this is an example of a fully self-contained decentralized app. I want to show under the hood what one really looks like under the hood. And this is a simpler one that we built, which actually does use a piece of the composable strategy that you saw earlier. This one actually has both a client and a server component, where we're going to see a sample user interface for doing a loan of a token into a loan pool. And there's both front end and back end code in this application. And I'm going to show what that looks like under the hood as well. So first thing, let me go ahead and launch the application so you can see it and get it connected to my wallet. And you can see that it knows what the balance is in my wallet and how much is out there available to be loaned and what the current price of Phantom is. And just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to loan 3 Phantom. And you'll see, I don't know if it's going to show MetaMask in the display or not, but I'll go ahead and confirm the transaction. And you can see it's waiting for the loan to complete. While it's doing this work, we'll switch back over here to this display, which is the internal Kilroy display. And you can see this message up here has changed. It's gone off at this timestamp, talked to an external exchange, found a price for Phantom that it used in the user interface over here to put a value up for the user to see. And the transaction's completed. We can click on it, go off to the Chain Explorer and see the actual transaction that happened. So that's a real live demo, again, happening fully off the user's desktop, no requirement for any external services. And let's take a look now at what's really behind this. So we're going to go off into the developer-focused editing world and give you a quick peek under the hood at what goes on in making one of these apps. So I'm going to go here and edit our sample dApp, and we'll load that into the editor. And just as a note, everything that Kilroy operates on under the hood is data. There isn't a requirement that there be executable code. So when you share things with Kilroy, you're not shipping around potential viruses or other executable code. It's actually almost exclusively JSON data that describes the steps in a process, the way to draw this picture on the screen, the operations that need to happen, and the engine executes that data. So not unlike a virtual machine, it just happens to be a very high order language that it uses. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. But first of all, it's important to see this is a normal drawing environment. All of these things are objects that can be manipulated and text that can be put in. So you can make, however good an artist you are or aren't, in my case, you can use the drawing tools inside of Kilroy to create, useful, meaningful user interfaces, whether they're going into production or you're just using them to prototype up a live mockup. Everything's live. This is a message area that's hooked up to the output from the quote, the get quote script. And let's look at that script, because this is actually a webhook that Kilroy makes available to the web user interface to call and get live quote data off the internet. It's all part of the package that was downloaded from the App Store. The webhook code, the user interface code, this graphical display is all part of that bundle. And just so you can see, I'm going to drag this screen over here real quick from my other window. This is what's inside one of the Kilroy apps. This is the sample dApp zip file that we downloaded from the App Store. I've opened it up because it's not locked. And you can see inside there are process diagrams, which is this thing back here that we're looking at. There are workflows, which we're going to look at in a second. And there's a web folder, right? There's a publicly servable web content folder that goes out to browsers. Kilroy normally operates off of a sealed up zip file, but you can also, in development mode, work inside of a folder. And let's go look at the code that's behind this get quote webhook. If I double click it, it'll open up a different editor window, and you can see now that this is a pretty simple workflow, which its whole job is really this box down here. It goes off to Binance and gets the quote for a particular ticker value, adds some timestamp data to it, and returns it back to the caller. And if you looked in the user interface for the sample dApp in here, there's a JavaScript AJAX call off to the Kilroy backend that says, hey, give me a quote for Phantom. And it goes and runs that particular script and packs up the result. Now, this is the programming language under the hood of Kilroy. It's a block-based language. There are literally hundreds of blocks. Green ones are structural. These magenta ones are things that cause the user to interact with the system. Blue ones are things that happen on the server. There's things for running other workflows and process diagrams and triggering events, writing transactions onto blockchains, doing serverless pub sub commands to other nodes on the network, scanning and creating QR codes if you need to share a wallet address or you're doing barcoded inventory or whatever your application is. Dealing with digitally signing documents, dealing with deal rooms. There's a whole set of services for each primary exchange that's out there where you can just drag over the exchange name, say that you want to do a limit buy order, fill in the information or pass in variables, hook it into your workflow, and now it becomes part of the process. The same thing's true of being able to invoke smart contracts on different blockchains. We could have an Ethereum call to a particular smart contract with a certain number of arguments in it. And later on, if we decided that we wanted to do some cross-chain work, we could duplicate that block and hook it together and say, well, maybe we want to do it on Ethereum and also mirror the transaction on, I don't know, Binance Smart Chain. And you put the personality blocks in. And instead of having to write Solidity code or Web3 code or custom interfaces into an existing blockchain, you just take advantage of these blocks. Every single one of these blocks equates to some chunk of JavaScript. It's dynamically loaded. You can do your own customized blocks if you have systems that you need to integrate with. It's very easy to just, blocks can take between 5 minutes and an hour or two to create, depending on the complexity of the logic. And if this level of coding access is not to your liking and you've got something more detailed or esoteric that you need to do, we give access directly to an event-driven JavaScript interface for each workflow that lets you hook into the beginning and the end of the workflow and the beginning and the end of any user interactions with forms or other data. So you pretty much have complete flexibility to interact with the system under the hood however you'd like. It's a lot to try to digest in a presentation only form. So clearly, if you want to learn more about this, as Brad said, we should follow up after the call. The last thing I want to show, which is probably one of the more fun things, is the GameFi integration that we've done. And so I'm going to go back over here, and in this case, Kilroy, just so you understand the architecture, Kilroy is interfaced to a Minecraft server through the Minecraft plugin interface. Events that are happening in the game world are being forwarded to Kilroy. Kilroy does some operations and then forwards results back into the game world. So where you would normally have had to be a Java programmer to do extensions to Minecraft, now you can use the drag and drop functionality inside of Kilroy to build rich interactions for users in the game world without actually having to be a programmer. I'm going to open this window up. It's not really going to do anything, but I'm going to have it in the background so we can see some messages that will show up in this message area right here. And I'm going to switch over to my Minecraft client and start the game back up. Here we are outside of Kilroy Central, right at sunset. And we're going to go inside and I'm going to show you a couple of custom integrations that we did to bring in real world DeFi data into the game world. So it's not a very exciting room, these buttons on the wall. But if I go over here and hit this button, you can watch in the display on the left where it currently says BTC ticker stopped. When I hit this button, you'll see that Kilroy gets a message that I pressed a button. And lo and behold, Kilroy went out onto the internet, got a real-time quote for Bitcoin, pulled it in, drew a candlestick chart for it, and created this Minecraft-esque style video display on the wall for a Bitcoin quote. I can go do the same thing over here for Ethereum, and Phantom, and now we have Minecraft trading floor. So that was the first level of integration we did, and I'm not exaggerating at all. This was a 3-hour project, start to finish, to get this level of functionality in an existing Minecraft server. Now, the really fun thing is outside here, and we'll run over here to the control console here. Integrating with the game world is really a pretty interesting opportunity when you have an external platform that can do a lot of compute and a lot of interactivity without changing the game. We'll start this up here, and what you'll see in a second is that Kilroy is being asked to go out, find another Bitcoin price, build a candle chart for it, and build it in the game world as a real world big wall full of data. And you can watch on this sign here every 10 seconds, the timestamp will change. And in just a second, you should see the candles on the rightmost edge of the graph will change. The whole graph will slide over as the graph updates with the candle being closed. So you can see that, in fact, there it is, it's live. And we can go over here and do things like punch holes in it. And in a second, when it redraws itself, it will come back with the see it fixed itself. So that's an example of real world interaction in the game space, moderated by Kilroy. And this was, with the exception of about 10 lines of Java code to get our first plugin done, it was a no code exercise in doing this integration. So with that, I think we'll bring the demo portion of this to a close, and I'll put the contact info back up over here. That's it. I guess, Lilith, if we have any questions or comments, we're happy to field them now.
Great. Thanks a lot for the presentation and for the demo, folks. Also, is it possible to share any context in the chat, or maybe share this with me after on, so that we follow up with everyone who attended and they can easily get in touch with you? Great. We do have actually some questions. We have comments in the Q&A section. Andrew has posted that this is some next level tooling and a very cool idea. So
thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Great, cool. Thank you. And from the audience, actually, you can submit the questions either from the chat or Q&A. Also, there is a raise hand just at the bottom of the screen. So you may hit on it and voice out your questions. Let's see if we have. Oh, yes, thank you. I see you shared it.
Yes, if anybody would like to talk about their project and what might be possible, we'd be happy to do that. Chuck's just put our contact info into the chat. And
actually, I mistakenly didn't send it to everyone, so let me do that again. I apologize.
Okay. We'd be happy to talk about your project. We're in the early stages of our Bitcoin integration, so it'll be very interesting to us to talk to projects that are building on Bitcoin, to see what we can do currently versus the full integration work that we're doing as well.
I actually see one question in the Q&A from Andrew. He's telling, so it sounds like this is a tool set for building workflows, or does this meant to build smart contracts as well?
So it can be used for workflows. It can be used for building entire dApps, pulling in existing components of smart code. There's really not a lot of limits with what's possible with Kilroy because it can pull in so much functionality. And in addition, you may have some hardcore developers that you're working with that can build code that can then be called into Kilroy. So you can theoretically iterate on the code and the engines that you're building, iterate on the interface, iterate on the flow, iterate on the interaction, and then also more easily integrate with other platforms. And then if it's something you want to do, you can make your functionality available in the App Store for other people to utilize in their applications. So there's really no limits as far as I'm concerned. Chuck, I don't know if you want to.
Let me add one more thing to put a finer point on that question. If you look at the code that we generate inside of Kilroy with this block-based language, by default, it generates a big JSON object that has the steps and the arguments and the things to do. It doesn't generate code. So there are additional code generators that will take that JSON and could conceivably turn it into Solidity or JavaScript or C# or whatever you wanted to translate these blocks into. So the ability is in the platform to do, for instance, Solidity generation. Generally, what we do, though, is we start with templatized Solidity contracts for a lot of the applications that we do, and use Kilroy to inject specific information, a token name or a quantity to be issued, or another contract address or a wallet address, and use that to deploy the contracts. While we could generate Solidity directly out of the platform, I think it's generally the case that people like to eyeball it before you do an automated deployment. So you could use it to build it, but you'd probably still want to go through your normal audit and deploy process.
A few more questions from, yeah.
Go ahead.
From Andrew, actually, there are a few more questions. So how easy does this pull in other technologies? Like Taro, do you guys read protofiles for API discovery? And he also is double checking. Sounds like you guys are building an abstraction layer.
I think an abstraction layer is a great way to look at it. In terms of Bitcoin technologies like Taro, that's one of the things that's on our list of integrations. Right now, we're building out the core platform of the financial capabilities that we want to deploy. But Taro is definitely on the list. But Chuck, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but there really is, from an integration perspective, not very many limits, but I'll let you speak to that.
And in fact, it's a great collaboration opportunity. We've had several examples of people who had functionality that they wanted in the Kilroy block language. Give us the blocks. Here's the stuff done. Just please put it in the next release of the product. So if you wanted a particular technology that your project was dependent on, you're perfectly allowed and able in this environment to build out your own extensions, have them included in the distributed final system. But it's really easy. I mean, these blocks are a few dozen lines of JavaScript generally to do a block. If there's a well-defined API or a service out there, it's very quick and easy to do these. So integrating these external services, as long as they have publicly accessible APIs that make sense to try to normalize as a block, it's really not hard to do.
Wilson had a question.
Yeah. Wilson from BlockServe has a question. So is there a possibility to push data as well? He's building a decentralized survey tool called BlockSurvey. He's looking for enabling integrations with games like you have shown, and pay in Bitcoin for completing a survey. Can you shed some light on how should I approach this?
Well, in the case of Minecraft, they have not very good interactive capabilities at the text level. And maybe what you would do, the same way that we generated a real-time graph on the wall, you could put messages up, buttons that change dynamically that were the survey questions and answers. There's a lot of ways to do this where on a per user basis, maybe in a room that has a door that's only openable to a particular user ID, and you use Kilroy to decide whether or not the door unlocks. You go inside, the survey is on the wall, whether it says text like this or something that you draw, or pictures like the video screens that were in there. Give the user, ABCD buttons. There's a lot of ways to do that in game that would be able to use exactly what we already have built in Kilroy with no changes at all. That's one way to do it, right? There are question and answer functionalities directly in Kilroy, the ability to build interactive forms where I want to have a form that has some fill in the blank fields, a text field in it, and some other things. And you could build the form dynamically, give the user an in-game QR code. And I'll show you an example of that in here. We had actually integrated an Etsy store. I have to go down this little secret tunnel here. And I think so we actually integrated an Etsy store into the platform. Let me, got to go hit a button over here. if I do this, it's going to automatically generate a QR code on the wall. If you scan that with your phone now, and everybody that's watching can go do this, it will take you to a live query on the Etsy store for Minecraft creepers and all the stuff that's out there that's related to that. So you could do your surveys this way, right?
Yeah, and I would say theoretically that you could build something for, say, Unity developers that would integrate with Kilroy, allow for the easy creation of those surveys, and then for game developers that want to pull those in, they could, if you were partnering with them and working with them. So you could make it very easy. We don't know your business model, Wilson, whether this is something where people are paying you to get surveys to game players, or if the games themselves are your partners, the developers of the games themselves are your partners. If that's the case, you could theoretically build a module that would let them plug in and use Kilroy to easily create the surveys, or you to create the surveys, depending on how you're approaching this. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, in terms of pushing the data.
Great. Seems like these were the questions so far.
Great.
Great. So thanks a lot, Brett. Thank you, Chuck. We do have, yeah, Andrew is just thanking for the presentation. Yeah,
You're welcome.
Thank you to Andrew.
And
yeah,
like we said, feel free to reach out if you have ideas, you want to brainstorm about things. We're early days with our Bitcoin deployment starting, so we would love to be working with some startups that are trying to get going and building, and would like to prototype, MVP, or build their full application. So feel free to reach out to us.
And in fairness, because of the background that we've got in evaluating startups and helping run various aspects of them, between Brad and myself, we've probably had every C-level job in a startup at some point or another. It doesn't just have to be about using Kilroy. There's other things that we can help advise you with, tokenomics or business strategy, or things like that as well. So it's not just these nerdy things that we've been talking about.
Oh, by the way, we do have one more question from Wilson in the chat. I just got it. He's asking, would Kilroy enable SDK as well in case he chooses to build for Unity devs?
As in, I guess, could you call Kilroy functions as a service from the Unity application? Because you can make these webhooks, which are literally as simple as dragging a webhook block off the screen and double clicking it to add the logic behind it. Kilroy can have an infinite variety of services that it exposes to other applications. They don't just have to be dApps running through the Kilroy application. They can be other applications on the system that talk to Kilroy, and Kilroy can be an outbound data service to whatever. So absolutely, if you're running a game locally, you had Kilroy running locally, the game could talk to Kilroy and Kilroy could talk to the outside world. That's exactly what you're seeing happen in these charts up here. You're talking to the game internally, and it goes out, Kilroy on behalf of the game goes out to the outside world and gets new Bitcoin quotes.